Kevin, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited for this. And I'm going to tell you why I'm so excited. So you and I crossed paths probably nearly 3 decades ago, which makes me feel really old. Nearly 3 decades ago, without really knowing it. And you went to Leeds United as a young aspiring football player.
Yeah.
I joined Blackburn Rovers with the same dream. The dreams didn't go how we wanted, yet nearly 3 decades later, we sat together in a room like this. And from that young man from Wexford in Ireland to being sat here today and have accomplished what you've done with the trials and tribulations which you've been through is absolutely remarkable, and a story that's not been shared because of how you are, how humble you are, and probably how low-key you've chosen to be. So I'm really appreciative that you've agreed to share as much of your story as you'd like to today on this podcast. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Yeah, it's like I said, privileged to be here. So thanks so much for the invite. And yeah, 3 decades. It's pretty incredible.
Let's go for it, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start with Wexford. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Wexford, southeast tip of Ireland, on the coast. Beautiful place, great place to grow up. Over the 80s and 90s, it was a relatively small town. It's like most towns and cities now. It's grown exponentially and over that time. But when I grew up, it was a small town. I grew up in the town. Everyone knew everyone. My dad was a well-known person in the town, so it was lots of familiar faces and people and families growing up. So great place to grow up. Like I said, on the coast, so we had beaches. Great places to visit and keep us entertained as children, really.
And where did the passion from football come from then in Wexford?
Yeah, I mean, I think growing up in Ireland at that time, it was everything was sports orientated, really. So we had Gaelic games, we had Gaelic football and hurling, and then football or soccer.
Did you ever play that?
I did.
Did you?
Yeah, of course.
Wow.
Yeah. So I didn't play a lot of hurling.
Yeah.
I played a lot of Gaelic football, and I think
Tough
the
sport.
crossover. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it helped me really in terms of soccer and football, in terms of dealing with the physical side of the game, etc. But I grew up in an estate with a lot of young families, a lot of young kids similar age. I had an older brother, so it was night and day playing football on the street, and then that love of football, really. I think my earliest memories of the kind of Jack Charlton era, and there was an explosion of interest in football at that time. So that's really where the love of football, and I've got a lot of uncles. My dad, they're all into football, so I couldn't really miss it.
So was football always the dream for you from as early as you can remember?
Yeah, absolutely.
Every day out there playing football.
Yeah.
At what point did you start to think and feel that it was a possibility to actually become one?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. So my older brother was a brilliant player. I had a really close cousin as well who grew up almost like a brother as well to me, and he was a brilliant player. So I was always surrounded by older talented players. So that my earliest memory was playing in my first team was with my cousin, and his dad, my uncle, was actually the coach of that team. So I was probably 8 when I started training and getting into, it wasn't really organized games, I don't think, at that age. It was really when we kind of clicked into under 9s, under 10s, where it became more organized. But yeah, I mean, from that age, it was all football. I think growing up in Wexford, there was I suppose the level of quality. I always felt like I was really good, and then I know this probably sounds a bit odd, but even at kind of 10 and 11, I felt like I could become a professional, even though there wasn't. I don't think at the time there was anyone from Wexford that had ever gone across to England.
Really?
But I just had I just had this belief that it was a possibility.
And what was the first sign external from what you felt and thought that somebody maybe said something, or a football club watched you and made comment?
Yeah, so in Ireland they have a competition called the Kennedy Cup, and the Kennedy Cup is an under-14 competition where all the counties in the country come together and they play in a national tournament effectively, and that's really where the scouts for the schoolboy international team are, and you know, your step through really is first and foremost get onto the international team. I mean, in Wexford there's no scouts. In the 80s and the 90s there was no scouts that would come and watch the game. So you either played in Dublin, and I had a good friend of mine who was, you know, a brilliant player, ended up going to Everton and having a full career in football. Gary ended up going up and playing in Dublin from probably under 12s, 13s, and I think with the ambition of getting spotted effectively. But the first time was I was under 11s. I was only 11 when I played my first game for the under 14 county team, and the manager at the time he was very much involved even at an international level. He was really well known. Huge influence and impact on schoolboy football in Wexford, and he said to my dad at the time, I think he's got a chance. And you know, he'd seen thousands of children over the years, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm doing okay. And then ultimately as the couple of years rolled by, I ended up getting into the international schoolboy team. And once you're in that, you know, within a game, the phone calls start coming thick and fast from different clubs.
What did that feel like when you got selected for the national team?
Yeah, amazing. When you think about, so at the time it was, you know, you were clearly like Dublin was the real hotspot for talent, clearly, and it probably still is to a large extent. So, you know, getting an invite to the trials was a big accomplishment for anyone outside the Dublin schoolboy leagues, etc. And I can remember my uncle, who was my very first manager, and my dad went up on the train, and it was in a place we ended up going up for a full week. It was in a place called King's Hospital, I think it was, and there was several pitches there. But I remember arriving there, and there was probably 50, 60 players, maybe 50 players. And the vast majority are from Dublin, the Dublin leagues. They all know each other, and then the rest were around the rest of the country. So we were in one room, no one speaking, and then the room next to us, all the Dublin players there having banter, and it was really nerve-wracking to go into that environment and probably realize, am I good enough?
Yeah.
I always remember it now. My uncle and my dad, they stayed for maybe an hour, and then they left after they seen me settle in very quickly. And they said, he'll do okay.
Incredible. And then the phone starts ringing. Who was ringing?
So I ended up getting quite a lot of interest from memory now. Celtic, West Ham, Liverpool, Leeds, clearly. I think the two main clubs were Liverpool and Leeds. That showed that real interest, and the way it worked out, it was one of those scenarios where I ended up going to Leeds for, I think it was 3 weeks in that summer of 94, 95, I think, and I fell in love with the place pretty quickly, and what I realized is some of the year above, the schoolboy year above, you had Stephen MacPhail, who had joined Leeds. You had Alan Mabry in the year above that, who again was captain of Ireland. He had gone to Leeds. So there was quite a strong influence for me in terms of some of the best young players choosing to go to Leeds. And that was, there was a lot of Irish players there, which really helped. But I ended up going to Leeds, and pretty quickly after that 3-week trial, I was made an offer, and I decided to take that offer at that point in time. And I ended up then not necessarily going on to trials at other clubs.
How old was you then when you actually left home to go to Leeds?
Yeah, so I'd agreed to sign when I was 14, and I had another year. So in Ireland, you complete exams at a junior cert level, which is when you're 15. So that's a year below the GCSE level in England, but it's a similar exam level. So I ended up leaving home at 15, and moving to Leeds full time.
How was that, leaving so young?
It was unbelievably difficult, because I think in terms of where I grew up, it was everything: the sense of familiarity, the sense of knowing everyone to a large extent. I mean, literally, Luke, we even now, if I go home and we leave the house with my dad, within 5 minutes, he stopped to talk to someone.
Yeah.
So that comfort, growing up with really close friends, family, leaving at that time, and you're talking 1996 at the time, so there's no internet, there's no mobile phones, there's the connectivity wasn't there, so you are literally getting on that train. And I remember my dad still reflects on this. He came up with me the night before and we stayed in a B&B close to the airport because the flight over to Leeds, Bradford the next day was really early. And my dad always talks about he never slept a wink. I slept like a baby.
Yeah.
I thought I was, this was, I didn't realize, naive, being so young, what was coming. But yeah, I made the move then in I think it was July for the pre-season in 96.
So just before we move on to that chapter where you're at Leeds and what comes next, because that's kind of really where everything changed for you, wasn't it? With all the inspiration that you've got to go there, all of a sudden it's turned into a living nightmare. So just before you go, tell us a little bit about, your growing up in Wexford, your childhood, your family environment. And I had the good fortune to work with you in your organisation last year, and you shared a beautiful story of a role model that was just so key for you in your life, and very emotional, wasn't it? I mean, I was sat there listening and I looked at you and you looked at me, and I was trying not to look at you because I was getting emotional by the way that you was talking about this person. So just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I the two inspirational figures is my dad, but the person you're talking about is my grandmother. I got to be careful not to get emotional today, to be honest. But growing up, I mean, my family, it was a big family, traditional Irish family. So, my dad was, I had 10 uncles and aunties growing up. So lots of cousins, real family dynamic. But when I was young, when I was maybe 4, I think it was, my parents separated. And as a result of that, I ended up spending quite a lot of time with my grandmother. So my dad was a musician. That's how he earned his living. So most, definitely Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights, my brother and I would be in my grandmother's, some Thursday nights, etc. And that became a consistent, that was a consistent routine for us. But my grandmother, at that time, I don't really know how to describe, my grandmother, to be honest. She was, the connection I had with my grandmother is unlike any other connection I've had with any other person. I mean, my wife in a very different way, clearly deeply connected, but my grandmother and I don't know what it was. She had, obviously lots and lots of grandchildren, and I was always teased as being her favorite. But in terms of what she gave me, I think, you and I have spoke about this, Luke. It was just so much input, support, love. She really taught me how to respect myself and respect others around me. And it wasn't anything material. It was just on an emotional level. I think she just gave me so much, and an incredible person, really, really strong person. But, and the irony of it is, I mean, this is, during that period, she never verbally told me she loved me. Really? For all my life. She never told me, it just wasn't a done thing. But every moment that I was with, with her, I felt loved.
Yeah. What did she do?
She was just constant. She was someone who I felt at the time I needed, secure. And it wasn't necessarily anything, special in terms of what she did. In the sense, she was just always consistently there for me. And listen, it's all the little things. She'd let my brother and I, she'd let me, play football, in our house. She'd literally take, tights and wrap them up and make footballs for us. And my granddad used to go out every Friday, Saturday, across to the local for his few pints of Guinness and stuff. And we would literally turn her living room into a mini football pitch, and just literally just wreck the house, to be honest. I mean, when I think back now, I mean, my two boys, if they have the football in the house, I'm like, no, I'm not in the house, but she would just, and it was just little things, Luke. It was the extra hot water bottle in the bed. It was it was getting you ready in the mornings, and just she just took, you know, such a you know, a pride in terms of, you know, particularly my brother and I, and some of my cousins that were around, you know, the house. We all lived quite close together, and so yeah, nothing specific as such. I just think, you know, she was there at such an emotional level for me at the time. It gave me, you know, so much.
Sounds like stability that was there for you. You know, parents separating.
Yeah.
As you know, I work with lots of young people, and it is a really emotional time.
Yeah.
Such an important time.
Yeah.
And to have that person there for you like you did,
Yeah.
you can see clearly the characteristics you're talking about that your grandmother had that you've clearly got.
Yeah.
And isn't it amazing how you can model behavior without really knowing it so young?
Yeah.
Because when you said she taught you about respect and love and care, she wasn't sitting you down in a classroom.
No.
She was obviously showing you through
Yeah.
her actions.
Absolutely.
And you're picking up on that all the way through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she would always say, you know, treat people like you would like to be treated. There's certain things that really resonated with me. But, you know, what she did to, you know, teach me was, you know, family is everything. You know, the connection with your family is everything. And, you know, she had a tough life. You know, it wasn't easy. You know, and just how she just showed up every day.
Was you still involved with your mum and dad then at that point?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So my dad, like I said, you know, from an inspirational perspective, my dad had his own challenges, and you know, in his life, and how he dealt with those, the situation he was in. I actually use that. So my dad and I are extremely close. Growing up, and even to this day. But you know, in terms of how he dealt with the challenges in his life, and just, you know, he was there for my brother and I, to the point where, you know, my dad would literally give you the shirt off his back to this day, you know. And you know, I'm in my 40s now. You know, my brother's a little bit older than me, and even to this day, you've got that sense from my dad that he's always got my back, you know, 1,000,000%. And I think when I went through certain challenges in my life, you know, having that inspirational type of person in terms of how he dealt with certain things, you know, when he was giving me advice or when he was talking to me, you know, he's coming from a place of experience and counsel that you really respect. So it was almost a case of, well, if he can manage things in a certain way, like I've got to be able to step up as well and do this. So, you know, he was, you know, a real inspirational person for me, and even to this day, I just want to be, I want my kids, you know, to feel that I've got their backs to the same extent that my dad made me, and I think my brother feel.
And what about your mum?
So my mum, you know, when my parents split, my brother and I, you know, we grew up with my dad, you know, he you know, we lived, you know, together, and my dad was, you know, really the sole parent there. We would see my mum at weekends and spend time. So I've got a great relationship with my mum. And as you get older, Luke, you realize that, you know, your parents are not superhuman. They're human beings at the end of the day, and they've got flaws like everyone, like we all do. And I think you know, you grow up and you start to understand a little bit more the dynamics and how life is, etc. But you know, like I said, I've got a great relationship with my mum now, and I actually think, you know, partly it's how good my dad actually dealt with that situation. I think, you know, reflecting on things, he could have dealt with that situation in a much different way, and he didn't, which again is another inspirational way of viewing how he dealt with things. And he put my brother and I first, you know, in everything that he did, and I can clearly see that now, and how easy it could have been for him to have gone a different direction with things. And I have so much respect for that. And yeah, having my own kids now, you know, you start to really realize how difficult and challenging it must have been. And yeah.
So that must have been really challenging when you're leaving, you know, Ireland to move to Leeds, with all of that you've talked about there, your brother, your grandma, your family. You can just get that feeling as you're talking now of what a close unit it was. Even though there was separation, there was a underlying love there across everybody.
Yeah, and you got to remember, Luke, I was part. You know, I have an amazing family. You know, we're very close. My brother, you know, and I, you know, we have cousins that were like our brother and sister. We got lots of aunties and uncles that are very close So my dad's family are, you know, extremely close knit, all live in and around the town. We had a couple of aunties that lived in England, and you know, one auntie moved back, and so, you know, I had a great time growing up. You know, I mean, it was just a melting pot of different personalities. I mean, Christmas, you know, in my grandmother's house was amazing. We had all my uncles playing cards. We had all the aunties and cousins in, you know, fabulous, you know, memories and times. And, you know, there was no internet. There was none of that. It was just good, you know, good, solid, and, you know, entertaining each other, and just, you know, great closeness. And even to this day now, I'm still, you know, really close with some of my cousins. And my brother and I, etc., and I have a sister as well, and, you know, we're all very, very close, which is great.
How was they when you left? You know, when you was leaving to go, was it a big celebration of the success? My my son's been signed for a Premier League football club, or was it more, we want you to stay?
It's a good question. I mean, the Big Bang thing, you know, I think my dad, you know, probably started to realize once the calls started coming in that this was a possibility, that I would be leaving. And so it was probably from when you agreed to sign to actually leaving was probably close to 2 years, really, 18 months. And you're going over every, you know, Easter, every break, every holiday, you're flying over to, you know, to play games and stuff. So I think there was a transition from knowing I was leaving to actually leaving. And, you know, I had, you know, some celebrations with, you know, my friends and stuff, but it wasn't this, you know, big thing effectively. It was just, you know, I remember having, you know, kind of a leaving do and stuff. And then, you know, as you go over, they purposely, you know, fly you home after about 4 or 5 weeks. And I remember coming home and thinking, you know, someone saw me, thought, did you not, you know, leave 4 or 5 weeks ago? I thought, yeah, I'm just back for the weekend, you know, but.
Because was you not the first boy from Wexford to be signed to a Premier League football club?
Yeah. So there was actually a collection of players in and around my age group that ended up. So there was a couple of players in the year above that went to Scotland and signed for Celtic the year before, and then I mean, the irony of this. I mean, so Gary, who I've mentioned, Gary and I were in the same class in secondary school, but Gary. I think he was a few months younger than me. So technically speaking, you know, I'd signed for Leeds, and then Gary ended up signing for Everton after I think I'd signed for Leeds. But yeah, I think officially, I think you got to be 17 to sign a professional contract. So probably only by a couple of months. But yeah, I think technically I would have been the first person from Wexford. Yeah.
So let's talk about that. You arrive in Leeds. You have a few years there.
Yeah.
You want first team opportunities.
Yeah.
You decide to move to Nottingham Forest.
Yeah.
You're getting close to your first team opportunity. Everything's building. You're going really well, and then disaster happens.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So that So I spent 3 seasons at Leeds, and there was a couple of changes in different, you know, managers. So Paul Hart, effectively, who brought me to Leeds, he had left Leeds and joined Nottingham Forest. So, you know, Paul was a big influence and factor in me leaving Leeds and going to Nottingham Forest. And they actually, when I joined around the Feb, and they were relegated from the Premier League that season, effectively. So they moved down to the Championship, which you tend to get more opportunities, clearly. But so yeah, I mean, I ended up signing for Forest, and was, you know, getting a lot of involvement. So David Platt was the manager at the time, and you know, he liked my way of playing. He played a certain way, which suited my style. And you know how football's all about opinions, Luke, isn't it? It's all about different formation styles, etc., about momentum.
Yeah.
And I was getting games. I was getting, you know, a lot fitter, and yeah, I mean, I had a period near the end of Leeds where I just hadn't been playing regularly because I'd made the decision to leave. I think the club knew I was about to leave as well. So I came into the following season really fit, you know, doing well. I know another great crop of young players coming through. So, you know, some real talent. And we got into around the September time, and there was quite a lot of injuries. There was some sickness as well across the midfield in the first team. So, you know, there was players there like David Prutton and Garrett Williams and myself. And I think we were starting to feel like there may well be an opportunity here for us to make our debut or at least get an opportunity. And and it was a reserve team game. It was against Sheffield Wednesday, behind closed doors. It was a Wednesday. I remember before the game, it was Paul kind of came to me and said, listen, you're not going to start because there's a possibility you could be traveling at the weekend. So I was semi-disappointed not to play the game, but semi-excited, obviously, about the prospect. And I remember, actually, it was down on the training ground, and as the game was going on, I was just thinking, gosh, am I going to ring my dad? My brother always said, you know, if you give me the call, I don't care about work. I'm there. Mm. And it was a strange one, Luke. It was basically, we were winning the game really well. I think it was like 6-1 or so. You know, it was one of those games where we'd really played well, and I think the other, you know, Sheffield Wednesday were getting a bit frustrated. Managers put us on for the last 10 minutes just to give me a run, open my lungs a little bit, and it was probably only a minute or two left in the game, and it was just a really bad tackle where you know, my studs had stayed on the ground, and I ended up causing that compound fracture of my tib fib. So that, you know, it was, you know, pretty serious. We knew it was pretty serious pretty quickly, at least I did, and that's where really as I call it, the nightmare began.
So you're going to hospital that very night.
Yeah.
What happened after that then? At what point did you realise the severity of it?
Well, I mean, so that evening, so there was x-rays taken, and I'm still in my kit, still got grass on my stand, you know, I'm still in the bed, and the club physio, it was a physio called George Cooper, great guy, great physio, and Paul was there, Paul Hart was there at the hospital, etc. And yeah, I think there was one consultant, and I think from memory, and yeah, they literally came in that night and told me I'd never play football again.
Really?
Yeah. And I can remember that moment. I can remember, you know, spontaneously bursting into tears. And George Cooper actually there, I remember him holding my arm. I still remember it really vividly, saying like, I'll get you back. And I think, you know, he was coming from a place of really kind of caring for me and wanting to give me that sense of hope. But in fairness, it was an extremely serious injury. And unfortunately, the preceding weeks, things just got worse before they started to get better, which made, you know, the recovery, I think, to an elite level, you know, almost impossible.
Did you ever make a recovery?
Yeah, I mean, so you know, so I ended up spending about 5 weeks in the hospital, and I had 5 operations in 10 days, and I think, you know, we spoke about this, Luke. I mean, I had a really, really bad infection. So at the time, you know, I remember, you know, the doctors explaining to me that, you know, worst case is, you know, your leg, you know, we'll have to amputate your leg. So you know, you reframe things quite quickly, and just walking out of the hospital was on crutches was an ambition. You know, you kind of forget about football for that moment, for those few weeks. And then, yeah, I mean, I slowly, over the course of probably 12, 15 months, I got back to being able to at least play, but I wasn't right. The leg wasn't right. I knew I possibly needed an extra couple of operations. There was some damage to tendons in my foot, which is still there. So I think it was more of an ambition that everyone in the club knew that my career as a professional footballer was over, in effect. But I think it was more of I think from a rehabilitation point of view, just to get back on that pitch. And I probably played 5 or 6 reserve team games. I scored a couple of goals. I did okay, you know.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it was a great sense of achievement. And the other sense, you're kind of thinking, can I? But you know, I knew I was 10-15% off, and I would never get that back. And you know, Luke, at that level, 1-2% makes all the difference. So, you know, it was yeah, an acceptance. And the club dealt with it brilliantly, you know. So Paul, David Platt, Steve Wigley at the time, they dealt with it brilliantly. They sat me down and they managed that process with a lot of respect and I think a lot of compassion, which is sometimes lost in a very cutthroat world like football. So I'm really grateful and appreciative of how the club managed me at that time, and then what we'll get on to in terms of how I changed direction.
So how did you accept that? So once you knew, was there a window there of a period of time that you was just suffering with this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's probably very few people in my life that know how dark that time actually was, Luke. I mean, from the ages of 7, 8, you know, I wasn't Kevin Doyle. I was Kevin Doyle, the footballer. It was always the footballer. Is that the guy who plays football? Is that the guy? So you end up, your identity is football. You associate, whether you realize it or not, all of your significance. Are people interested in me just because I'm a footballer? And I mean, this is the idea of doing what you love every day. Working up to, I was 19 at the time. Working and getting so close to that place, really. You feel like you've let people down. You feel like you've let my dad, my brother down, my family. You lose that sense of identity. And I spent probably 4 to 6 months waking up every day, and the first thought in my mind was to do something. And I think it was I think the best way of describing it was, I was in a lot of mental pain at the time, and I felt powerless to change it. I couldn't change the fact that I broke my leg. I couldn't, and there was moments I would wake up and I would forget for a moment, and then I would realize I'd move and think, and then all of this, and then I never came close to doing anything, but there was, I know how it feels to wake up and for that first thought in your mind to be, I don't want to get out of bed. I can take this pain away. And I think it was more of a control thing, because I felt powerless to change my situation. I think it was just the sense that, I can take this pain away if I was to go to that place. But thankfully, I never did. But
what was you doing for that period then?
So what the club did, I'd moved back in. So at Forest, there's a road called Collick Road, where there's a couple. I think they might even still have these now. There's a couple of houses at the end of that road where the Bridgeford stand is, where a lot of the youth team and players live. So I ended up I had already moved out, and but the club moved me back into that to the digs effectively, so I could, on my crutches, I could get around to the club. So I was going into rehab every day. I was going in to see the physio every single day. But it was interesting, really, because I remember like great pros like Des Walker and others. They were brilliant with me. But I was the reminder of what could happen. As a footballer, you ask them, what's your worst nightmare? Your worst nightmare is to have a career-ending injury, and for all this to be taken away in an instant. So I was this reminder. I could see it in people's eyes. I could see how they were dealing with me, and they were coming from a brilliant place, But I could see, in the look in their eyes, and no one knew. I was great at putting a brave face on it. God, he's dealing with this really well, isn't he? But I think some of the physios knew how dark I was feeling, and knew how difficult I was finding it, and trying to conjure up just the sheer kind of willpower of just getting up every day, just getting out of bed every day, and just that feeling of, I think, hopelessness, Luke, and not knowing what was going to happen, what was I going to do?
Yeah, I can totally relate and understand that. And, I'm sat here thinking as you're talking there, of that feeling of what you're going through.
Yeah.
To then be sat here, it's quite ironic that now you're the managing director of an organisation that you founded that's physiotherapy.
Yeah. I'm a commercial director now.
Yeah. Isn't that unbelievable that,
yeah,
that you went through all of that pain, rehabilitation, then you decide to become a physio.
Yeah.
Was that born from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had some great people around me, and so during that period, I think it wasn't just the physical rehabilitation, it was just the influence that the physiotherapist and physiotherapy was having on me psychologically, and the way in which I kind of came out of that period was trying to, not let football define me, and now that it was gone, it was about trying to create a compelling future for myself, something that would be meaningful to me that didn't involve football. And the way in which the physiotherapy team and the physiotherapists helped me through that period, I think when you're in such pain and then you end up coming out the other side, those that influence that, I think, have a real deep impact on you, and that's what really created this huge passion and desire to become a physio, and not just to become a physiotherapist and get the qualification, which I knew would be I knew it would give me a stable career. I wanted to be able to help people, Luke.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to influence people. I wanted to be able to help people in the way that I was helped through the physiotherapist through that period.
And it's interesting that I read a quote that I think it was your dad that said you can suffer and be in dark moments back in Ireland, or you can stay in England.
Yeah.
Was there a part that you was thinking of going home?
Absolutely. I mean, the easiest thing for me to do was to just close myself off for years, and I had some money in the bank. I could have just gone. That was the easy way out, and I think I had created this positioning in my mind, which was, the opportunities could be more for me. In England, there's more opportunities. The PFA were brilliant. They were looking to support me as well, and it became. So once I decided that physio was for me, it was about figuring out how. I'd left school at 15, Luke. And you and I know that the educational components of academies now have developed vastly in comparison to when we were. And we never took it seriously, really. We were totally focused on becoming footballers. So I ended up finding myself at 19, 20, 21, where, I had to really, recalibrate my mindset to be able to get back into academia and understand how to go back and complete my A levels and, get the academic qualifications to be able to go into university, and then, adapt and my first few assignments in university, I still had huge doubts on whether I was capable of getting a degree in physio. I still have the first piece of feedback. I have to tell you that I've still got it. My wife and I, we still laugh about this. And it was an assignment on communication, and the assessor came back, and on the front page it was, basically is English your first language? Use a larger font. It will help with communication. Because we didn't have computers in school when so I was still just really trying to adapt to that. So you can imagine the doubts I had. But I know this sounds strange, but I was willing to do whatever it took. And my wife will tell people now, because we were together, during kind of, the 2 or 3 years that I was, over the course of university, and she was working at the time, but she would leave for work at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. I would be at my desk. She would go to work, go home, have her dinner with her family, shower. She would come over. It could be 8 o'clock, 7:30 at night, and I'd still be at my desk. And I felt like I had to do. There was individuals in my my year that were very academic. They would just put these assignments together in half the time that it took me. But I got there, and I was willing to kind of just put whatever it took into it to get my degree.
So when you graduated and you got the degree, that must have been such a feeling of accomplishment more than anything from what you'd been through to then learn to study again. Because I remember trying to learn to study again in a classroom. And it was like, what is happening here?
Yeah, I know, absolutely, Luke. Absolutely. I remember saying to people, going out and playing football in front of 30,000 people is a doddle to doing, this, presentation or putting this assignment together, and that's why, I like to, with my boys, and I want them, if there's, I think if the will is strong enough, you will find a way, and I think if it's not, you'll find an excuse. I think that's it's something that always resonated with me, and. We tend to not do things we're good at because it's easier to do things we are good at, and then we complain that we're not any good at this, but we've not done it enough. We tend to move towards the things we are good at.
So once you graduated, then you're a physio. What happens next? Did you have a plan of what you was going to do, or is it like let's get some work, let's get going?
So when I graduated, it was 2006, and there wasn't actually a lot of physio jobs available at that time. So the traditional route is you leave university, you go into the hospital, and you do a thing called rotations, where you spend several months on each specialism of physio, and that was a route that I was really interested in taking. But the other side of it was I was a little bit I think I was almost I almost wanted more. I still felt like I wasn't I wasn't the physiotherapist that I wanted to be. I wanted to be really impactful. I wanted to get, I wanted to be at, in a place where I felt like I was, really a physiotherapist that was getting great results. And
Yeah.
and to be fair, you know, the constraints on physiotherapy and physiotherapists in certain environments just means that you just don't have the time, you don't have the environment to be able to kind of get those results sometimes. So I ended up using my links in football to and what I did, Luke, is I ended up, you know, really wanting to understand, you know, who were the top physios. And, you know, Dave Ferv at Blackburn was one name kept coming up, and then this name kept coming up, which was Neil McDiarmid. Neil McDiarmid was the head physio at Birmingham City at the time. So I ended up, I knew someone who was working at Birmingham City who basically had a word with Neil and said, look, I've got a, you know, ex-footballer, he's a physiotherapist now, is looking for a job, etc. And the way things worked out, I ended up getting 3 or 4. I didn't have any job offers at all. I ended up having 3 or 4 job offers in the space of several weeks. And I was living in Nottingham at the time, and there was, you know, an offer from Forest to be, you know, in the academy physio, etc. And what I ended up taking was the role with Neil at Birmingham City, which is the furthest job away. So it was an hour and a half drive there, and, you know, an hour and a half drive back. The salary was the least salary that was on offer, but the reason why I took it was I knew that if I could get in and work with someone like Neil, could I model them? Could I learn from them? And you know, I had a plan, which was, you know, spend at least a couple of years and, you know, really absorb as much as I possibly could from Neil. So, you know, I then had, I felt like I could get to a level of quality as a physio that then I could decide really, you know, which direction I wanted to take my career.
So it's a really great way of doing it, that kind of finding someone that's great, getting around them, listening, watching, and use the word modeling. So at what point did modeling, so you say modeling as if, you know, you watch someone, you model what they do, but at such a young age, how did you have an insight to this?
Yeah, so when I qualified, you know, as a physiotherapist, I was always really interested in the communication side, and so I started to read lots and lots of books on neuro-linguistic programming and NLP, and really trying to understand what impact our words could have and our physiology could have when we were actually delivering treatments, etc., on patients, and why you could build rapport more easily, and all of those things became just a real interest of mine.
For what reason did it become a real interest?
Because when I assessed any really effective individuals, whether that be in football from a management, you know, perspective, coaching perspective, and then starting to see physiotherapists, I was trying to understand, you know, if a physiotherapist delivers the same type of treatment modality in comparison to another physiotherapist who delivers the exact same treatment modality but gets a different result, is the communication, is the rapport building, is the trust.
Interesting.
You know, can you exercises are clearly a really important part of the rehabilitation, and some physiotherapists would have a way of ensuring their patients actually did the exercises, and I would try to really understand, well, how are they doing that, and is there can I understand and can I learn how to become a more effective communicator?
And did you find when you was researching, looking at that physios were getting better results, that built good rapport, that accountability was in there? It's not just the same treatment and go. There was something extra within that.
I don't think that's exclusive to physio.
Yeah.
You know, I think as I developed it more and more, I think the best football coaches are the best communicators.
Yeah.
The best managers are the best, and not just external communication, internal communication. Why are certain people in a positive energy, a positive state most of the time? No one's in a positive state all the time, but how do people, what's the internal dialogue that they're telling themselves each and every day to get them into a certain state? And I just became really quite obsessed by it, to be honest. I was just reading, I must have read, you know, 50-60 books, and I went on and did, you know, the NLP courses. I became a master practitioner and stuff like that, and I genuinely started to find that the better the rapport I had with individual patients, well, not all the time, but but obviously, the better results I seem to be getting.
So tell us about when you go to Birmingham City, then you start to model Neil.
Yeah.
What was you noticing that was working really well that maybe he didn't know was working?
Yeah. Well, I think Neil was and is. I mean, he's not a physiotherapist now, but I mean he's retired now. But he was an incredible physio, just an incredible physio. But So technically he was excellent. You know, his diagnostic skills, all of those things, all of those fundamentals that someone has who's completed years and years of physiotherapy. And I think he was at Birmingham for, I think in the end he had been there 15 years. So, but it was, not to go back, but it was his communication. Neil had a private clinic that he would see a handful of patients privately when the players had gone home. So he had a certain way of working with elite sports people, and then he would transfer that. So it was almost I'm going to treat Luke Staton as an elite performer, and I'm going to go through the same process, and I'm going to make them feel, and I'm going to really go through that. So I ended up really doing extra hours, extra days that wasn't in my contract, just so I could spend time with him and understand them. And what I started to find was his communication was consistent, and I would ask him questions around why are you asking that question, and actually start to kind of break down what his what he was thinking effectively, and how he went across and how he went through his assessment, why he would structure his rehabilitation with the individual in a certain way. And I would I obsessively studied what he said, how he said it.
It was funny when you told me that the first time you observed him, you sat with a notepad and pen, and you was writing down everything he was saying. And he asked you, "What are you doing?"
He asked me that. He was very interested in what this guy was doing. But I literally, I was probably more than I needed to do. But I literally would write down everything he said and how he said it, and what patients would say and how they said it, and what I started to find that there was consistency in what he was doing, and there was a real purpose behind what he was saying, and again it was his physiology, how certain he was in terms of how he went the bow, and you really felt like he knew his stuff, and I think that then instilled a confidence in patients, in his ability to help them.
At what point did he trust you to start to work with his people?
Yeah, because again, part of that plan was again, when you're dealing with elite sports individuals, professional footballers, you're dealing with a certain level of individual, and you not that becomes boring in any way, but you want variety. If you want to become a great clinician, you've got to have variety. So I wanted to see the 40, 50, 60-year-old with the ankle issue that they've had for 6 months, or and that just wasn't happening in an elite environment. So I really wanted to try and persuade Neil to let me start to treat some of his private patients, which he was they were precious to him. That was something that he was very reluctant to allow me start to see some of his private caseload, but I think it was probably 6 to 9 months after I'd started, he started to get confident in my ability to manage his private patients.
So you were the one then that really kind of talked to Neil, because he became your business partner, didn't he?
Yeah.
Was it your suggestion, or where did it come from to set up a clinic outside of the elite environment to provide everyday people with the same service?
No, I think Neil always had that ambition. I mean, and Neil was the creator of the business, and he was the and I think what Neil probably saw in me was actually, we can start to scale this a little bit more now. We can actually start to grow. So we ended up, we used the training ground as a treatment clinic, and then we ended up opening up a clinic that was a mile from the training ground, and then there was a couple of other sites that were already established, and Neil had other clinicians that worked part-time for him, but I won't say I broke the mold as such, but I ultimately had an energy and an ambition that I wanted to. I think I almost got to the place where I can only see 40, 50 patients, let's say, in a week, but if we've got 10 physios doing 40, 50 patients a week, I can influence 500 patients a week, and if I can influence the clinicians in a positive way to get great results. There was there was an ambition there for Neil and I to and there was another clinician as well that was a director in the business. There was an ambition across the three of us that we would scale this.
Can you remember what the ambition was? Did you have a target of how many sites you wanted, or was it let's go with it, let's see where it leads?
Yeah, we wanted to be on a national level, and I think Neil had a certain ambition that he wanted to reach. I think for me, I think you always look back and think, I think we were taking it a step at a time. I think it was, grow the West Midlands, and then let's see how we can start to look at, different cities, different, conurbations in similar areas, and start to scale that.
So it's interesting because someone else who's coming on the podcast, a friend of mine, David Baldwin, he had one accountancy firm and grew it to 100.
Yeah.
And they went from $1 million turnover to 250 million in 15 years. And I asked him the question, I said, was the plan that? He said, no. The plan was to get one and go again and go again. And before you knew it, it got momentum.
Yeah.
And then it became obvious where it could go.
Yeah.
So as I'm listening to you, there's a real relentless focus when you're talking. Yeah. And it's all about ambition. It's growth, it's development, it's improvement. Yeah. It's an obsessive focus on learning and getting better yourself to help other people get better.
Absolutely.
And when you've got that energy, like you talk about there, you've got that energy, it becomes a real positive influence on the people around you. So you get better results with your clients, your patients. You get more physios want to join you.
Yeah.
People start to love the idea. People start to like to be around you. Before you know it, you've got multiple sides.
Yeah.
At what point did you start to realize we're actually doing what we set out to do? What scale did it start to get to when you realized you was catching that momentum?
Yeah, so in 2010, so Neil and I left Birmingham City in 2008, and so we grew the West Midlands to probably around 6, 7 sites, and I think, again, these might be slightly out, given how long ago it was. There was probably 7, 8 clinicians that were part of the team at that point, and then Ascenti, effectively at that time in 2010, they actually acquired the business, with the ambition of scaling it. And we had a 3-year plan from 2010 to the end of 2013. I think initially we were aiming at around 100 clinics, but Neil quickly doubled that number, and so we ended up scaling over that 36-month period from 5, 6 sites to 200 plus sites nationally.
And was that your role to scale it? Had you stopped treating people?
Oh,
then?
No, I was still seeing. I was still in clinic. So what we ended up with a site in Solihull in Birmingham, where they had treatment rooms and a rehab area and a breakout area where we could do interviews, we could do presentations and stuff. And upstairs was the office, effectively. So I was still treating. I still wanted to keep myself, active clinically and keep myself sharp, because ultimately I was doing a lot of the recruitment. Every single individual I met, every individual that joined. So I think there was over a 4 or 5 year period, I think it was over 1,000 individual physios that would have joined.
You met them all?
I employed every single one.
1,000? Yeah. Over how long?
Probably, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 years.
And you met every single one?
Yeah.
For what reason did you do that?
I think initially it was, I think because of the culture, the culture of the business was, the culture of the organization was key. So I wanted to always make sure that, anyone joining the organization, they were coming on board for the right reasons for themselves. But I felt like that, culturally they would facilitate that culture. So, no one could really talk about what our ambition was as an organization, how we could help that individual, at the time better than I could. So, and I felt like that was the fundamental rate limiting factor. So if you think about what we were trying to achieve and we worked it back, the number one key rate limiting factor to us achieving that was actually being able to employ the right level of clinicians in the right areas, etc. So it was a critical component to success over that period. So, I always wanted to make sure that I took responsibility for that.
And what was you looking for in them one-on-ones? Because I guess you're obviously hoping that the fundamentals of a physio are there, the basic skills. Yeah. What are you looking for that it is a yes, what is it that you see and feel, because you've put so much time and effort into the communication, the NLP?
Yeah.
So reading people, getting a
Yeah.
feel for people. What did you go in with a plan into that one-on-one, or is it like, I will get a feeling for if they're right or not?
I think it's a little bit, clearly you need to make sure the fundamentals are there. So, you go through, the interview and the onboarding, and you get all of the, the key areas done clearly. But once you've established the fundamentals are there as a clinician, it's then about the person.
Yeah.
And it's about their energy. It's about their ambition. I think their willingness to learn, their willingness to grow. And to me, it was, I think the promise from us to the individual was, we will put everything into your training, into your development. We'll try and support you. And listen, look, I mean, I'm not saying everything was perfect. The growth,
speed that you was moving.
We made mistakes. I made mistakes. We never got it right all the time. But I was very lucky. We managed to bring on and bring into the business some unbelievable individuals, and my success is 100% down to the team, down to individuals around me, getting the right people. The one thing that I felt like I did well was recognize how to build a team and put people with the right types of skills into the right types of roles. But it was the team that it was the key driver to success. And so it was the individual really, and it's difficult to objectify that. I think it is a subjective piece, but and I never got it right all the time, but I'm glad that I got it right the majority of the
It's
time.
intriguing, isn't it, how you can just, sometimes you meet someone and you have that feeling, you just know. Just know. Like when me and you met last year for the first time really, other than crossing paths in our journey. I just knew that I wanted to stay in contact with you. If I'd have turned up there and you wasn't that guy that I thought you was, we wouldn't be sat here today.
No, absolutely.
Because I'd have swerved you. And you'd have swerved me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when I spoke to you, it was like speaking to someone that feels and believes in the same things. There was a commonality there.
Absolutely.
And we spoke all the way home on the train. We shared a train journey, didn't we? We were speaking about all sorts of things. And I think because your story is so relatable to what I felt and was around as a young sportsman, it's difficult to comprehend what you must have felt when that dream came to an end. Mine came to an end, but not because of injury. And I'm in that mindset when I'm listening to you, but then I'm hearing all of these challenges that you've been through, of how you've gathered all of these skills because of those tragedies that's took you to a place that you could grow an organization over a 4-year period from 1 to 200 plus clinics and recruit people because you had that ability. And I think something in sport which is usually transferable is over to the business world, is that togetherness, that understanding of a human being and what makes them tick, how to help them get more from themselves than they ever knew that they could. And something that I've recognized in you since talking to you last time and this time is that you've got such a great way about you that seems to just make you feel comfortable in conversation, that I feel like I could tell you anything that I wanted to with no judgment being received from that. And that is a sign for me of what a great leader looks like. You're not sat here going, I grew a company. You're talking about the great people that helped you do it. Your skill was finding great people. I'm really interested in how when you sat there, because like you said, you can't really, what is it? If someone said to me, what is it about Kevin, Luke, that you loved so much when you met him? Until you ask that, then you start to, like when you was asking Neil questions, of, why are you asking that question, Neil? He's then thinking, I'm not sure why I asked that question. So we do things subconsciously a lot. And you and I connected for no other reason, and probably we've got the same outlook of life of your grandma, my grandma, treating us the same, treat people well and be kind and be caring.
Absolutely.
So as you're at that level now, when you've done all of that over the last 10, 13 years, you've gone from one clinic to how many have you got now?
300 now.
300 clinics. How many patients do you see a week on that approximate?
So at the moment, we complete over 600,000 sessions of physio a year.
a year.
Yeah.
Wow, 600,000.
Yeah.
So
Give or take.
So
Yeah,
give or
yeah,
take.
yeah, yeah.
So you go from one clinic to 5 to 6 clinics to 600,000
Yeah.
appointments a year
Yeah.
of physiotherapy.
Yeah.
How many team members have you got now within the organisation?
So there's 800 plus employees now.
Wow.
Within Ascenti. Yeah, and that's the culmination of a couple of businesses. It's not just the original business, but yeah, over 800.
And when I'm listening to you, it sounds like there weren't an incredible strategy at the beginning. There was a target, and then you went after it.
Yeah.
And when you and I spoke about you're looking for premises, you're looking for landlords that will give you premises.
Yeah.
You're also interviewing 1,000 people.
Yeah.
What was your life like through that period? Was it like a whirlwind?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean,
did you have that buzz back for
yeah,
life?
yeah, like that. Yeah, it wasn't like I mean, you know, it was, but it's a group of people. I couldn't wait to get going on a Monday morning.
Yeah,
you know, I couldn't wait, and I couldn't wait to be back involved and around the team and the people in the organization. And look at, you know, I always say, you know, strategy is key. You know, execution and culture is king.
Yeah.
That, you know, so you can, it's critical you have a strategy, but the culture within your organization will create the energy and the momentum, and you won't get it right all the time. But as long as, you know, I think you get the majority of the decisions right, you know, again, then it's about the speed. And, you know, we would always have a saying that we do today what others do tomorrow.
Did many doubt you throughout that process?
Absolutely. I've doubted myself as well. I mean, there's always moments like that. I think, you know, we would talk about what our ambitions were, and you know, I don't think people would have laughed in my face, but I think there was probably a few laughs, you know, that you know, our ambitions were so, at the time, probably felt and sounded like just so wildly out of touch and out of reach. But I think there was a part of me that, you know, really believed that it was possible. And I think being able to ensure the others around you believe it's possible.
How do you do that?
That's a great question, Luke. I mean, I think,
or how have you done that? Because you have done that.
I think what's really interesting is the you know looking at what your targets are and being able to chunk them down to a place where you know what your next month or your next 6 months needs to be, and making the team and making the organization feel like they're winning. So, you know, and I always use football as that's always my go-to in terms of analogies and you know, kind of, you know, trying to translate certain things. But, you know, when you're in a football club and you're winning, everything's good. Everyone's in a good mood. When you're in a football club and you're losing, it's a difficult place. It's a much more, the environment, the energy is just difficult. So I think one of the key areas for us was to make sure that individuals and the team felt like they were winning consistently. And then you get this growth mindset. You get, okay, what's the next target? And then you start, as you progress, you're thinking, actually, this is possible. We can keep doing this. And I think having a really clear and making sure it's simple, it's simplified as much as possible. I think, you know, if you try and put, you know, the target and it's just too far out of reach, it's, you know, some people just, they stop before they get started. It's trying to make it, it's trying to, you know, frame it in a way that people know it's winnable. So, you know, we didn't set out and think we'd be doing, you know, 500,000-600,000 sessions in a year when we started out. It was, okay, let's get to 1,000. Let's get to 10,000. Let's get to 100,000. Let's get to, and then by the time, as you just said, with the other person you've interviewed, then the momentum is just everywhere.
Must have been wonderful for your wife, seeing what you'd been through, to then the challenges that you went through to just get qualified as a physio.
Yeah.
To then seeing you wake up on a Monday instead of wanting to take the easy way out and not and do something drastic, you're now getting up with a spring in your step and want to go to work. Yeah. Because sometimes when you're entrepreneurial like you clearly are, and you're ambitious and you're driven, it can sometimes drive their husband, wife, family partner's crazy because you're always out the house, you're always talking about it, you're always on the phone, you're relentless, just relentless. Yeah, I can imagine, and please tell me the way it was, that it must have been nice for your wife to see you in that state and that energy because of what she'd seen you as previous. Was she a big encourager of you to keep going at that pace, or was she like, what, Kevin, like slow down a little bit? Because I can't imagine you ever slowing down.
I mean, there was moments, clearly, you know. I mean, you know, but you know, she, you know, Emma's always been, you know, a huge supporter, and I think when you're in that state, whether it's in, you know, in your professional life, you know, it's bound to spill over into your personal life as well, which is positive. So I think what, you know, Emma knows the 20-hour days, 18-hour days. You know, she's seen, you know, that this. I think when you get to a certain place, you know, it's easy to kind of think, oh, he lands on his feet, you know, it all, you know. I think, you know, Emma's seen that, you know, the tough times as well. You know, there's been, you know, incredibly difficult times. It's not all been, you know, really, you know, it hasn't all just happened, you know, so I think, you know, yes, you know, there's a lot of time away from home. You know, there's almost a bordering of obsession about it, and I probably do probably still talk about things too much. And that probably irritates Emma, but you know, but in terms of supporting me, I mean, you know, I just couldn't ask for a better partner.
What is the obsession for you now? Because you've done so much. What drives you still, even though you've accomplished all of that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't feel like, I mean, even when I was a footballer, you know, I would always look at, you know, even when I was doing well, I would always look at I would always look and think, no, you know, there's better players than me. There's players playing, you know, I need to get to that level. And I think if I had been playing in the Premier League, I would have wanted to play in the Champions League. You know, and even now, I like I've said to you before, you know, offline, really, that I don't sit around thinking I've achieved a lot. I know that might sound odd, but I don't. I still. You know, I still feel like, and maybe that's a good and a bad thing in some ways. I'm pretty harsh on myself. I still feel like I could be doing more. I still feel like I could be doing it faster. I still feel like I can, you know, it's what we're not doing rather than what we have done. And I think, you know, I'm having the ability to kind of get to the same and then kind of recalibrate and go again. You know, it's a huge amount of energy and it's draining. So I don't think I could probably end up doing this forever. But you know, I still don't feel like we have got to the place that I really wanted us to get to. I still feel like there's, you know, more growth. You know, there's more things for us to accomplish.
And it's fascinating because I'm sat here and, you know, I'm quoting figures here that I've read, nothing that you shared. But when you look at where you started to have a company that revenue around 40 million a year in revenue, 600,000 treatments a year, nearly 1,000 team members, and you're sat there saying, I don't often think that I've done that much. I mean, one point you was doing one patient, and then your organization that you've been key integral part of building and creating and still are, is doing all of that, and you're sat there saying, well, I don't really think I've done that much. It's like, it's really incomprehensible when I hear that from you, because I'm like, what? But often that's such a great characteristic that you've got there of how you play it down. I wonder where that comes from though, that playing it down. You think that's a cultural thing, or is it just you don't want to feel like you've done so much because you feel like you want to do even more?
I think it probably is a cultural piece. You know, maybe it's just part of my makeup, really, you know, my upbringing and just how I am.
What more could you do?
I don't want that to sound come across in the wrong way. I mean,
it doesn't at all.
I don't know. Maybe I find it difficult to give myself credit, because it's interesting. Because when I see other people, I'm incredibly complimentary. I think when I see other individuals, whether regardless of where they are, even those individuals that I'm working with, some of them, I'll pour the credit, and you really try and make sure that they understand how well they're doing and how well they have done. I think it's probably something that is definitely been there. I've always been, harsh on myself, probably too harsh at times. Yeah, and maybe that's something that from football and from other factors in my life that, it's just.
Have you ever took a moment to enjoy the progress? And I don't mean going out for a meal and celebrate. I mean that moment where you think, from what happened on that pitch against Sheffield Wednesday to what I've got to now, I've shown a lot of character. Yeah, because it has character to do that. Yeah, the influence of your grandma, your dad, and all of these people. That's all part of what's got you to this point. Because lots of people have been through what you've been through and won't have managed to overcome it for whatever reason. Support network just couldn't overcome it. I've got friends, as you will, that their football career was over when mine was, and they chose to do certain things that maybe isn't positive for the world. Yeah. Because that was the path that they chose. You've chosen a great path, and I'm fascinated by this because I love people, as you know. Yeah. And I wonder if sometimes it comes from that sporting background, as you're only as good as your last game. You've always got something else to prove. Just because you played well today, don't get too big for your boots.
Absolutely.
As a kid, as football, one manager I remember saying to me, today's game, tomorrow it's fish and chip paper. Yeah. You've got to go and do it again. Yeah. And the fear of not doing it again keeps you on your toes. Yeah. Do you feel that you're in a place now that you're going to be there for the next 3, 5, 10, 20? Is it going to be all physiotherapy industry based, or do you see you utilizing your skills in other arenas too? Yeah,
I think because of how busy we actually are and just how focused I am, I don't really take time to think of other areas, or I tend to not necessarily look beyond kind of 36 months really, and everything is very clear in terms of what we need to do and what I need to do within the organization over that period. I think beyond that, I think I'd love to get to a position where I could look to do certain things that could help individuals, groups similar to yourself in many ways, Luke. I think if I think I would really enjoy that, and I think the idea of helping people, or the idea of helping even one person, for me is it would give me great satisfaction. So I think in the next 2 or 3 years, everything is very, very focused in terms of what we're currently doing. I think beyond that, I like I said, I don't tend to think too much, plan too far ahead. Clearly, given my life experiences, you can, life can hit you hard and very quickly if you're not careful. And I think that's part of the not taking anything for granted, not getting too ahead of myself, because I know that life can humble you very quickly.
So have you ever taken a moment to sit there and give yourself a little pat on the back in a moment and gone, I've done good?
Yeah. Not in a moment. I think having kids, I think doing things like this, the idea of that my boys can maybe watch this one day and think, oh wow, my dad did okay, he did okay, and someone to for them to be proud of, and that they're the things that mean more to me, Luke, really, about being a good husband, a good father, a good friend, good colleague, someone that may have influenced people in a positive way. And they're the things that, as much as the numbers all sound impressive, I've got individuals that started out as physios that are managing directors and CEOs of other businesses, and people that we brought in and form part of that brilliant team that have gone on their own personal journey. And I'd really like to think that if you were sat opposite them and you asked them the question, that I influenced their life in a positive way, because I think there will come a point where when you do reflect, and I'm a firm believer in what you remember really are the connections, the team members, the colleagues. That's what you'll remember, and not the fact that you did 100,000 sessions or whatever it is.
The connections with people,
100%,
which is what's helped you grow to the level that you've grown to. How do you keep that connections with people now when you've got so many team members?
Well, I think on a regular, on a consistent basis, there's probably 15, 18 people that you regularly have contact with, and I think that's always been the case, no matter how big the business is or how big the organization you're working in. I think there's only a certain amount that you can influence on a regular basis. And that's still the case in many respects. And clearly as the business grows and scales, you get less and less involved in, in certain areas of the business. But yeah, in terms of the individuals that, I and colleagues that I interact with on a regular basis, I think it's just being in a good state, a positive state, energetic state, and just making sure that, you turn up.
Yeah.
And I mean that in a way that,
yeah.
I'm there, and it's about, for me, it's just about getting, for me, it's trying to get the best out of people.
What advice or tips would you give to anyone starting a business to, when you're on your own and you're getting going, to create a culture of what they want? Where do you start? Because when you're on your own and you're trying to bring people on, you're trying to deliver work, you're trying to bring people on, you're trying to manage money, trying to create a brand or whatever industry you're in, but you also would like to like the people that you meet every day and work with. What tips would you have for that young entrepreneur starting, or any age entrepreneur, when they've got so much to do and they want to have a great culture? Is there any ideas that you've got on that?
I almost feel embarrassed giving business advice out, to be honest. That's just me. But I think you have to understand why you're doing what you're doing. So when we started out, I am to this day unbelievably passionate about getting people better. That's it. So get your CFO in. They're an expert in what they do. They'll manage things. Get your operational manager in. They'll manage that. Get your HR director in. They'll manage that function. But for me, every session counts. Every individual deserves to have the best version of you as a clinician. So if you're, wanting to create a certain culture, you have to have a certain DNA, and you have to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And if why you're doing what you're doing is to make money, you're going to create, in my opinion, a negative culture. And that's not me being naive, in terms of business, mechanics. Clearly, you need to survive as a business. You need to make money, etc. But if your question is how do you create a culture, for me, you've got to have a why that resonates with people.
Amazing. How do you maintain focusing on culture and people when you've got such ambitious targets like you've got with Ascenti to grow and grow and grow at a speed that you're growing at? How do you keep that focus on it? We've got teams now, and we've got individuals that focus on communication and culture within the business. I think for me, it's by representing it. I think you can have your business values on a piece of paper. Yeah. Forget that. Live it. So when people interact with me and you ask them, name the 4 values or characteristics of that person, they need to match your business values, without them having seen what your business values are or what your organizational and cultural values are. So that fundamentally is for me, and that resonates. Then I like to think throughout the business, really. But as a leader in the business, if you like, I think you've got to live and you've got to represent what your cultural values are. And those people that I met with you on that day, I'm thinking of that they was 25, 30 incredible individuals. So without meeting them, I would be thinking, how do you have nearly 1,000 people and create such a wonderful culture? But the 20, 30 in that room that then looked after multiple hundreds of people each, you can see how, because there was magic. Them people in that room, there was no resistance. Everybody was all in. There was sharing. I mean, everybody got up and shared a role model. There was tears, and afterwards we went out. We were playing darts, and the banter, the fun was amazing. And Tino, one of the guys who I've kept closely in touch with, was getting the games all wrong, and people are trying to win via not probably playing fairly. You kept winning. I don't know how that happened.
Bullseye.
But it was just great fun, and you could see that people genuinely enjoyed spending. No one was like, "Oh, I don't want to be here. I want to go. Everybody enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Everybody played all in. Everybody was working towards a common goal. And I think when you've got that ingredient with an organisation that you all work into something that's greater than just yourself, that relentless attitude of every patient who walks through the door could be my mum, my grandma.
100%.
How would I want him to be treated?
Yeah, 100%.
That keeps your game on point, doesn't it? Because you and I both know in life we all get tired.
Oh, absolutely.
And some weeks when you turn up and you wake up and your kids have messaged you that have forgot their own workbooks and you're trying to rush them to school, but then you're turning up to deliver something that
you need to be on
point.
And
you walk through that door, and straight away when you flick that switch, and you're like, right, someone in here needs this today. Someone in this room needs to hear this message. Doesn't matter if I'm tired. Doesn't matter if I've only had 3 or 4, 5, 6 hours sleep. Doesn't matter that I've just rushed to school because my son's forgot his pack up or his football boots.
Absolutely.
These people in front of me, they need this, and I'm going to go after
100%.
it. And it's amazing how that can shift your energy to make you perform. And then once you start, you're in it, aren't you?
100%.
And that racing about that you've done has disappeared. And you've got the ability to do that because you wouldn't have been able to employ 1,000 people. Because you must have rocked up sometimes thinking, another 3-4 hours, and wife's like, you're going to be home tonight. I don't know what time. The interviews ran over. So I'm sat here and I'm just full of admiration for all that you've done. I absolutely love the humble way that you bring. I would love to see you accept some credit, and I can see you're not going to, because I keep trying to bring that out of you. And I think that one day your boys will watch this, or your boys will see what you've done and say, Dad, wow, you really helped 800 people into employment and get a job to help. You really helped 600,000 treatments a year take place. You really grew something from this to this. And I think as they get older, I've got children myself, and as they get older, they start to ask more questions. My son's nearly 15, and only over the last 18 months has he ever asked about my football. And I've started to share with him little bits. And then my son will start to say, okay, what is it you do? What did you do now, Dad? And you share little bits. My little girl will ask certain questions. And you just tell them enough to hope that they are proud of what you do.
Absolutely.
But there's no greater feeling, Kevin, and I think in the world, is that when somebody gives you a compliment in front of your kids for something you've done to help them, you want to turn around to your kids and go, look, I'm pretty good, you know.
I've done all right.
I once went through a Starbucks drive-through, through COVID. The highlight of the day was a drive-through. I love drive-throughs.
So do I.
Sometimes I drive through, I buy a coffee and I forget to drink it. I just love that break of my journey.
It's absolutely.
Weird.
Exactly the same.
I go through this drive-through, and Sienna, she was probably 8 then. As we go through, I wind my window down. You weren't allowed in the shop. The lady kind of brings me my coffee, and she looks at me, and I look at her, and I say to her, do I know you? And she says, yeah. She says, you come through this drive-through a lot. I said, no, not from the drive-through. I think I recognize you. She said, are you Luke? And she must have known I was Luke to say that straight away, but maybe they're not uncomfortable. Do I know them? Do I not? I don't want to be the first one in case. So I said, yeah, I am. And I saw a name tag. It was Rowan. And I said, I know you. And she said, yeah. She said, you came to my school. This was like 5 years ago.
Amazing.
She said, you came to my school. And I was like, oh, right. And Sienna's next to me, just getting a frappuccino. And cost me a fortune in a drive-through. So she sat there and she puts a straw in and she's listening, but not really listening, you know. And so as I'm about to drive off, the young girl through the window, she says, it worked. And I put my foot on the brake and I looked across and I said, what do you mean it worked? She said, and this gives me goosebumps when I talk about this, because everything is for this. This is, all of it is for this.
Absolutely.
All of it. And as I'm sat there, I looked and I said, what worked? She said, you did an exercise with us. She said, you asked us to write down any goals, dreams, hopes and aspirations on a piece of paper. Now, Kevin, this was 5 years ago. Before this conversation. And I worked with that class for 2 hours a week for 6 weeks. That was it. And 5 years later, she's quoting an exercise. She said, you asked us to write down our goals, our dreams, our aspirations. And I said, yeah, I remember. I still do them exercises now. I think they're valuable. And she said, well, I wrote down on that I wanted to go to Cambridge University. And I'm starting in September. And I was like, you can imagine my energy. And my Americano, it was like a bottle of champagne. It was like, I was buzzing.
Yeah.
And I looked at my little girl,
Yeah.
I was like, look, listen, your dad knows what he's doing. You need to listen. I mean, I was surprised at the result 5 years later when sometimes you think the kids in the class aren't listening. Now, she was a girl in the group that I would turn up and think she was disengaged, not listening. She'd sit at the front, rarely get involved, but she's listening. And I looked at her and I said, you know what? You don't understand how happy you've just made me telling me that. That energy of what you've just given me there from that will give me energy for another year.
Absolutely.
And if I don't get any more compliments for a year, that's enough. And
Yeah.
Sienna went home, wanted to tell people,
Yeah.
And the power of that is just remarkable. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is because being so humble as you are, there'll be a moment that your boys are with you and someone come along and go, if you hadn't have helped me get that job, I wouldn't have become a managing director at somewhere else. And I think that's what life's about. Can we open doors for other people?
Absolutely.
Can we be the enabler of somebody else's dreams and ambitions while we're living ours too? I'd love you to come and work with me. Honestly, you'd be a dream. Like I can imagine that. You know, you don't often meet people that you think their relentless work ethic and focus can beat yours because we're competitive, aren't we?
Absolutely.
But I'm sat here thinking, gosh, you'd be an handful. You'd be like, Luke, I've got another talk here. What time? 11 till 12 at night. But I'm in London all day. It doesn't matter. You can get there.
Absolutely. Make it happen. Make it happen.
We're going to open 10 schools.
Oh, listen. I mean, my wife always says, you know, whatever I do, I'll times it by 10.
All in.
Yeah, all in.
All in.
Yeah.
Any questions that I haven't asked you? This is what I like to ask the guests at the end. Any questions that I haven't asked you that you would like me to ask you? Or what would you ask yourself? If the seats was reversed, what's the question you'd ask yourself that you've never been asked before?
Gosh. Oh, that's a good one, Luke. No, you've been pretty comprehensive, in fairness. I think you've covered it really. I mean, I think how, you know, I went from being in a place of disillusionment, no direction, you know, feeling unbelievably low emotionally and psychologically, to then what shifted really. You know, how did I shift that? It's probably an area where, you know, if I were wanting to speak to me effectively, I'd want to try and understand that, because, you know, when you talk about some people making decisions that maybe are not healthy, I can completely understand that, because there's a need they're trying to fulfill, and it almost borders into desperation in terms of trying to fill. And when you're desperate, you'll make bad decisions, and sometimes you're trying to fulfill something in a negative way. But, you know, for me, it was, you know, I've been really fortunate as well, Luke. I think the harder you work, or the more you put yourself out there, sometimes the universe tends to give you certain things, or you start to attract certain people and certain things into your life. I think that is probably one of the most interesting things maybe about me. But
how did you then answer the question?
I think it's with, you know, with the right people. So it was about creating a compelling future for me. What you know, and I think we sometimes hold value in certain things based on what you think other people expect you to do. So, you know, as a footballer, you think, you know, I'm only significant because I'm a footballer, and what the perception of being a footballer is, whether that be, you know, money, or whether that be whatever it is, you know, that kind of social status, if you like. And I think when you then lose that, you know, some people try and get that back by making poor decisions, trying to fulfill that. I think for me, it was about understanding that, you know, life is short. You know, someone sat me down, sports psychologist, and said, you know, if you're lucky, you're here for 80 years and you've had 20.
Yeah.
You got 60 left. You know, are you going to waste 10? Are you going to waste 5? Are you going to waste 1? And then what was actually really important to me, and as you uncover what's really important to you, he was able to actually frame that in a way that, well, you can achieve those things and have a meaningful life without football.
Yeah.
And I think by having that compelling future and creating a why for myself, or why was I really wanting to become a physio? What, you know, because you know, to get the energy, to get the desire to go and do what you have to do, because anything worth anything in life worthwhile, you're going to meet resistance. You're going to have to push through tough times, and you have to have that desire to push through, and that comes from, I think, you know, really understanding why you're trying to achieve what you're trying to achieve. So I had great people around me, you know, I think that helped me enormously. But then at the end of the day, you're the one that has to do it.
So create a compelling future for yourself,
100%.
gives you the energy.
Yeah.
And then find why it is you want to accomplish what you want to accomplish, and then go after it, all in obsession.
Yeah, and the reality is, you know, the vast majority of people I believe are capable of far more than what they realize.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I think we just think certain things are beyond our reach.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's probably cultural.
Yeah.
You know, it may be, you know, your upbringing, you know, my dad would feed me with positivity. You know, he would tell me, you know, you can go and play for Man United, and I believed him. You know, and he believed it. I think, you know, but I think if you place limitations on, you know, and even from a good place, you know, sometimes you want people to avoid disappointment, so you're trying to help it, but in some ways
protect them, really.
Exactly, and you might not be helping. So I think you got to be careful with your words and careful with your messaging, particularly, you know, trying to be careful with my kids as well. But, you know, it's I believe anything within a certain reason is achievable.
Yeah, and you can back it up
100%
with a reason why. It's often is why not.
Yeah.
If you have an idea and you want something, someone says you can't, you just say, oh, just show me why.
Yeah.
And they often can't think of the reason why you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
What they do is they put their own paradigm on you, don't they?
Well,
They think, well, they couldn't do it, so they think you can't do it.
Yeah.
It's really interesting when you say, oh, just tell me why you don't think I could.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're stuck.
Yeah.
They are stuck. And then they're thinking, there's not really a reason why.
Yeah.
I said to my son yesterday, I was having a bite to eat with him.
Yeah.
I said, son, your dad is close to becoming an author.
Yeah.
Right? And he looked at me and went, what's one of them?
Yeah.
So my moment was lost.
Yeah.
It could have been a moment, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
He looked at me and went, what's one of them? I
Yeah.
said, son, somebody writes a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like, oh, not interested.
Yeah.
But in the moments, though, moments when you're thinking about, if I'd have said I'm going to be an author many years ago, the lads that I went to school with would have been like, Luke, come on. In fact, one of my good friends sent me a hilarious video recently.
Yeah.
He listened to a podcast I've been on. So my friend watched it, listened to it, and I was talking about when at school I got a U in English, and I thought I'd done really well in the exam. I thought I'd smashed it, honestly. I remember sat there thinking, I've absolutely hammered that. I'm brilliant. And I got a U, which is obviously unmarked. So I shared this story on a podcast, and my friend who went on to have a professional career in Premier League and had a great career, he sends me a video, and he's like, Luke, I've just listened to your podcast. He said, firstly, before I get onto what I've messaged for, firstly, a U, he said, is diabolical. He said, absolutely. I mean, I don't know what you was doing. He was in the same school as me, so I don't know what you was doing. And then he said, but to listen to the rest of it, he said it was brilliant. He said, to hear what you talked about there, he said, makes me sad at moments to hear of how you felt at moments in your life after football. But to see what you're doing now, it's really great. And that video, I've saved it because it meant a lot to me. And I was laughing my head off when he was having a bit of, as we'd call it, banter between teammates. But the message was a really nice one to hear from him.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it cracked me up because if I'd have said then, I'm going to write a book, people would have literally, and me, I'd have been like, how? How do you even write one? And 7 years ago, I created this, and it's coming out this year.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So the limitations that you set, though, are often how you are in that moment. So in that moment, if your writing's not very good, and you've never told a story before, and you've never written anything, you're not going to think you're going to be an author.
Absolutely.
If you tell a story and you tell it well, and someone enjoys it, and then you write it and post it, and someone gives you a compliment, you think, well, maybe I could elaborate on that. So the hope comes from doing,
Yes.
not thinking about
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
The hope comes
Yeah.
from pulling a trigger
Yeah.
and then aim sometimes.
Yeah.
Just go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Too many people
Yeah.
I meet, and
Yeah.
I think people sometimes think I'm a bit crazy.
Yeah.
Because I could be at a market store
Yeah.
and somebody's got a gift and they're
Yeah.
selling something.
Yeah.
Art. I
Yeah.
had it recently. There was a lady selling art, right?
Yeah.
And I said to her, "Is this what you do?" She said, "I do it part-time."
Yeah.
And I just can't help ask
Yeah.
why.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm looking at the art and I'm like,
yeah.
"This is brilliant."
Yeah.
And she went, "Oh,
Yeah.
thanks."
Yeah.
And I said, "How come you do it part-time?" She
Yeah.
said, "Well, I want to do it full-time, but
Yeah.
what if it doesn't
Work out.
work?"
Yeah.
I said, "But what if it does?"
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And she's like, "I know, I've got a job to earn the money and this is on the side." But
Yeah. Yeah.
and in her mind you can see but what she's doing in that moment, she's putting all the barriers and obstacles she can in front of herself
Yeah.
to justify not doing it.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
not her fault she's not doing it full time.
Yeah, yeah.
It's because she's got a family to feed.
Yeah,
Which is
absolutely.
a fact.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
not the reason you're not doing it full time.
Yes.
It's the
Yeah.
belief of you could do it full time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I probably had 15 minutes. I probably walked away and the girl's thinking, who is he?
Yeah,
She actually went to me.
Yeah.
She doesn't no idea who I am. It's just she went,
yeah.
"You should be a life coach."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just didn't even mention anything
Yeah.
of me or what I did. I just
absolutely.
said, "This gift you've got
Yeah.
to do this
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah.
It's a shame that the world doesn't see it more."
Absolutely.
And she was like, you could see she wanted to go,
yeah.
"Get rid of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm on it."
Yeah, yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
just be careful
Yeah,
with your decision,
yeah.
but why
Yeah.
not go for it? I
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
what would be the worst
Yeah.
that could happen?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And she went, "I'd just get another job."
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
"I know," but we paint
Yeah.
it to be this big thing
Yeah, we do.
that we're not conforming to
yeah.
society of
Yeah.
doing what we should do
Yeah, absolutely.
and being cautious.
Yeah.
Go after it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
yeah,
go
yeah.
after it.
Yeah,
and I'm going to
absolutely.
share this with you because it's really important. What we're talking about there, my brother shares a story of when he's running up and down the same hill,
Yeah.
160 miles up and down the same hill, ultra runner.
Yeah.
And as he's running up and down it, there's 27 runners start. There's only 3 still going.
Yeah.
And as people start to drop out, people start to blame external factors.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's freezing. I
Yeah.
mean, it was December. It was
Yeah,
hailstoning
yeah.
and it's snowing. It was cold.
Yeah.
70 miles per hour wind.
Yeah.
But my brother said what was interesting is guys that just don't quit
Yeah.
start to quit because of external
Yeah.
factors.
Yeah.
They would say, "I don't want to get hypothermia and
Yeah.
die. It's
Yeah.
freezing cold.
Yeah.
I could do it
Yeah.
if it wasn't so cold."
Yes.
And the guy quit. He said this guy quit. He rang the bell at the bottom of the hill and dropped out. For 10 hours, he was fighting with quitting, but he couldn't quit because he doesn't quit. So
Yeah.
he was blaming the cold.
Yeah.
So he said, I could finish if it wasn't so cold. So he
Yeah.
rings the bell.
Yeah.
A week later, my brother said he read a blog from that runner.
Right.
And the blog said, "I quit.
Yeah.
It wasn't the cold. It
Yeah.
was me."
Yeah.
And I think what you've just said there and what we're talking about is that people put obstacles in front of them
Yeah.
that shelve the blame of looking at themselves in the mirror at the age of 80 and going,
Yeah.
"I wish I'd have gone for it."
Yeah.
The reason I didn't go for it is because I had a family.
Yeah.
The reason I didn't go for it was this.
Yeah.
I'm not saying people should just
Yeah.
like drop all responsibilities and
No,
leave
of
the job
course.
tomorrow.
Be
But if you've
reckless.
got a
Yeah.
dream, why not
Yeah.
go after
Yeah.
it? Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like what
Yeah.
else is there?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I'm really
Absolutely.
passionate about it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
poor girl on the market
Yeah.
store
Yeah. Yeah.
with the
yeah.
art. Or,
She's quit now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She like, "I took your advice."
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, "How's it going?
Yeah,
Please,
yeah,
please
yeah,
say it's
yeah.
going well. Please say it's going well. Because if it's not, I'd have to bring her
Yeah,
to
yeah.
this where we are to get the marketing company here to help her or something. But when people have got that gift, it's just often the
Yeah.
fear of it not working.
Absolutely.
And then you only need someone to say to
Yeah.
you, "I don't think that could work."
Yeah.
And that's enough to go,
Yeah,
but if you've got
absolutely.
someone like your dad that's going,
Yeah.
"You could play for Man
Yeah,
United," you're like,
yeah.
"Do you think?"
Yeah.
Why
I
not?
do. Yeah.
It's been so good talking to you,
Yeah,
mate. It's been
amazing.
brilliant. Have you got anything you'd like to ask me before we go?
No, really. I mean, I'm hoping I've added value today. You know, I think, you know, like I said, I was pretty privileged when you asked me to join you. So it's just, you know, a massive thank you really for me. It's been great to come and speak with you, and I love being around you. I love being around people with your energy, Luke, to be honest. And yeah, no, it's just a thank you really. I mean, look, it's been great, and I've really enjoyed it, and I hope I've added some value.
You certainly have. And I want to ask you one more thing before we go. We come back in 3 years' time
Yeah.
and we do another recording.
Yeah.
What's one thing that you'll share with me that you've accomplished that you'll be most proud of?
Gosh, look, you do ask some tough questions.
You'll be driving home thinking,
I will.
what else was there?
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, Luke, I think it's more related to to my kids really. I want my kids to be in a good place, be happy, and I think my eldest will be in secondary school by then, and my youngest will be fastly approaching secondary school. So yeah, I mean, in 3 years, I want to be healthy, I want to be happy, and just as importantly, if not more important, I want my kids and family to be healthy and happy.
Fantastic. Great way to end. Thanks so much for your time, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.